seats here. Gosh, what a room full of amazing people I find myself in. Thank you for welcoming me to the Gold Coast. I'm so excited to spend some time with you. This is going to be a fast hour, so it's pumped with a lot of information because I want to make the most of the time we have, but hopefully it leads to other conversations that we can continue on. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Julie Lottering. I'm the Director of Education at Epic Games, and I actually come from a family of artists. So my family moved from South Africa to Canada when I was young, and I started to learn English when I came to Canada. And my parents, who were artists, started their careers as art educators in Canada. And they found themselves in rooms full of students, just like me, who didn't speak English. And I could see them as teachers work through visual arts to give a language to these students, to help them build their confidence, to express themselves, and to integrate. And it was so powerful. And I think that if art is a language, then technology is our way to move the craft forward. So that's what I'm here to talk to you guys about today. So let me start with a few questions. Who has been using Unreal Engine for more than 3 years? Nice, okay. And who is totally new to Unreal Engine? Great. And who, one last one, has made an Unreal Fortnite island, like a creator island using UEFN? Nice, cool. So for those of you who might be new to this, the Epic ecosystem is a variety of different things, and it's complex and amazing all at the same time. At Epic, we hold two perspectives in parallel. The perspective of the player, so what makes something fun and interesting and engaging, and we do that with our own games that we make. And then we hold the perspective of the artist. So what are the tools that we use for Fortnite or Rocket League, and how do we make them flexible for a variety of different industries and for possibilities that we may not even be able to imagine ourselves. And it's this kind of combination of our own creative process and then making sure that those tools are robust and flexible for others that is a very special combination. Now, on the education, learning, and training team, there are sort of three parts. We have training, so that is customer training, and our training team has created 130 courses of amazing content that range from foundational to complex. Then we have our partners, and so we train trainers. We have authorized instructors, training centers, and academic partners. And then we work with academia, and that is through workshops and curriculum, but also connecting the pieces to the industry. So what I'm going to talk about today is the perspective. It'll be a really quick dive into a perspective on the industry, and then we're going to go and spend a lot of time on student success and curriculum, and then we're going to look at our academic partner program. So I love the story that this graphic tells. Who's seen this before? Anyone has had a glimpse of it? Okay, a couple people. What it tells me is that in 50 years of video games, one, we could probably all find ourselves on this map with some sort of game experience that we've had. Even if you're mostly in film here or media and entertainment, there's probably a moment where you're like, yeah, Street Fighter at the arcade, I love that. And it also shows how much of video game history we can hold in the palm of our hand. Now, there's one thing that's not on this, something that happened in 2011, and that is, can anyone guess? What happened in 2011? Oh, so close. It's even bigger than Unreal, but I love that you guessed that. It is that video games became considered an art legally for the first time. That happened in France. A law was passed, and this changed all kinds of things related to IP, the way that countries funded games. And when you think about that, 2011, video games became considered an art. Damn, that's not a long time ago, right? So this stuff is pretty pioneering. And when we think about Fortnite and Epic's journey, you really see since 2011, we changed from a battle royale game to start to add in oh wow, we don't just want to do that, we want to have people build with us. Let's add the creative tool set. Well, that's really neat. We also want to include music and fashion. And then we said, well, we're actually noticing in 2022, 40% of people are spending their time in that creative mode. That's fascinating. Let's keep building the tools and making sure that they can build with us. And Unreal Editor for Fortnite was just that, giving more capability. But it wasn't just a tool that was invented, it was an economy that we started. And now people can earn revenue at the same time using Fortnite's social graph. And then we really busted it out with Lego and racing and other experiences. And so you see from 2017 to today, games moving from like something we would consider a game to experiences. And we actually even have changed our language in the way that we use it. And so I mention this because, there's sort of three things that are changing our desire for virtual goods: access to tools, the ability to publish, and then there's a desire for more virtual goods. There's a couple seats just here on the end if you'd like to grab them. Every educational institution is tied to the hip with industry. So you're like, Julie, that's great. So much is changing so fast. How do we even respond to that? Right? How are we expected to keep up with what is happening in industry? Yeah, it's a little bit bananas, right? So we're here to help kind of decide what are the things that need changing and what are the things that we need your help with as core competencies. But department growth is like fascinating. So over the last, I would say, 10 years, we've seen about 20–30% of growth in games and media and entertainment year over year. And of course, it's an amazing opportunity for students to work on something that they love, whether it's a film or a game. But job placement is extremely important in this, right? It's a responsibility, but also something that allows for departments to get funding and expand. So I wanted to acknowledge that there's been some hurdles in the industry recently, and that shifts in hiring, and there have been strikes in Hollywood, and it makes it very challenging for any students that are graduating today. And not just that, but there are fees being passed on to lots of customers. And so I want to say that one, our tools remain free for students and educators. We try to do as much as we can to lower the barrier of entry. And so that means free curriculum, free courses. We try to make all of our online learning free. And that's in some ways selfish. We just want as many creators to join the ecosystem because we believe that the more people who are building and telling stories will make the world more interesting. And so we're committed to this. And I'm going to do the first thing, because you're going to see a few of these, is get your phones out, take this QR code. I'm going to have them throughout the presentation. I would be the worst high school teacher probably, because I'd be like, get your phones out. And you're not supposed to say that to the kids. But, if students are going through and finding some career hurdles right now, this is a resource we've made. You can share it with them. There's quite a few pages that go in there talking about different kinds of careers. But it's something I wanted to put in your hands early in this presentation so that you have it and can direct your students to it. Now, those hurdles aside, we talk about it as weather. You're going to have stormy weather. And when you think that how new this industry is, just becoming an art in 2011, you're going to have some stormy weather. But that is not the climate. And we believe that the best times are still here to come. And the best times are here to come because we see partnerships, amazing work. We see the emergent technology being used and adopted in a matter of years, then winning Oscars. Right? This is incredible stuff. And this is where your students will be finding work. These companies are growing. They're looking for 3D content. I kind of try to explain my job sometimes, mostly to my parents. And I say, right now, if you think about all the content creators for TV, for film, for video games, that's about 1% of the population that is making all of that content. And my job, and maybe yours too, is just to make 1% 2%. And it's wicked hard. It's so hard to be doing this. So I'm going to wrap up on that industry perspective and just remind everybody, this is still so early. Your students are going to be seeing a lot of change still to come. And, our tools and partnerships are there to welcome new creators. So now what I'm going to show are some of the ways that we've tried to make those barriers easier for entry and think about students and that industry. So what are our insights that we can share with you? And I'd love to hear yours as well. And so we're going to talk about student success and curriculum. We, in February, launched something called Unreal Academy, and we're doing it in a phased approach. So we have Unreal Academy, we did first for training, then we have partners, and coming this summer, hopefully July, maybe a bit sooner, we've got an academia piece. So this is a highly curated space for educators where you can go and you can find learning paths, those career resources for your students. And it really should be an assembly of like things that you can give to your students so that they have help in the classroom, as well as self-learning for you. So if there's any industry insights, job, skill compositions as an example. So we did a research study, and we decided, okay, we're going to think about what our customers are doing, like what are they doing to learn the tools. We're going to distill that and find tutorials that your students can take, and that's how we came up with these learning paths. We're starting with games, UEFN, visualization, animation and architecture, but you're probably going to see motion graphics and a few other things added there. And then we have assignments, projects, ideas, and I'm going to share a whole bunch of those throughout this presentation so you can see kind of what they're like, at least a couple of sneak peek examples. And those came from us asking industry, hey, what do you think would be a good class assignment if you were going to test the skill for someone you were hiring or someone that you were working with as a school as a mentor? So those assignments were coming directly from studios we worked with and their ideas. And then we have industry and careers. And so we know that it's so hard to imagine all the jobs that are out there. It's so hard to know for a student exactly the contribution that they can make. And exposure is very important along that process. So we've put together a video series that I'm going to show you a little bit here, but there will be more to come called Career Connections. So let me give you a sneak peek. This one focuses on Epic and some of the roles we have, in particular because as we are making games, it's an easy story for us to tell and show how many different job roles there are beyond lead animator. Oh, let's try it.
I'm Jeremiah Grant. I'm a product management director at Epic Games.
My name is Adrian McLaurin, and I am a playtest researcher here at Epic Games.
Hi, I'm Agni Stavranaki. I'm a game balance designer here working on Fortnite Battle Royale. A good game is a series of interesting decisions. What we aim to do is to give the players those options to choose from, to make the game interesting, to make them want to keep coming back for more.
You play a game, you know whether you like the game or whether you dislike the game. You know whether something is fun or whether something is boring. The big part of my job is to not just take in the information, but to also kind of coax additional answers out of people.
I work on the product management team, and this team is building out everything that you see in Unreal, from Niagara to MetaSounds, our new sound system, to some of the really cool tech that we've seen recently, like Nanite and Lumen.
So that's a sneak peek. That one's focused on games. We'll probably be doing one for visualization and media and entertainment as well. But I think it gives students like an idea that there are so many jobs that are, and with the changes in the landscape, that they can engineer their own career. So on Unreal Academy, you're going to find some upcoming tutorials. These will also be on the Epic developer community, but that's a great library. We just want to make sure that the space is curated for educators. And so we're going to have motion graphics, first hour in motion designer, animation, and then twin motion for art directors. So over the course of the next couple months, you'll see these coming out. And if you have a school that's interested in a live version of these, we can organize a workshop. So we could say, hey, do you want to bring your students for a live version of this? And then we can kind of follow it up with the durable content. And then the other thing that we think is, gosh, when I speak with educators, one of my favorite things is to ask them, like, what do you wish you had when you were getting started? And everybody has an answer. Like, typically there's like, oh man, you don't even know. I had to struggle so much with this. And if we could all think about that and make one tutorial that we wish we had or that we think would make a difference, you know, it would do a world of good for our entire community. So we've actually created a series of how to make great on-demand content, like online content. Live instruction is a different beast from those amazing YouTube stars. And I'm not saying we're going to coach you to be like a crazy YouTube influencer, but we've just really tried to take what are those principles for creating a piece of content that's, or learning content where it feels like you're in person with the learner. And so we've gone through all the supplementary material. Added to this is material you can share with your students. So some of the most successful programs that I've seen are when they when a student is creating content at the end of their project. So they're creating a tutorial. And so here you could give them everything. This is on designing that video, editing the content, supplementary material, set your at-home setup for it. And so again, this is another way for your students to start to build their profile, because they can say, hey, I put a tutorial out. And like, isn't it a crazy feeling that, you know, X number of people watched it? And then for our academic partners, which I will give you a little bit more information later, there's a chair right here in the middle too, is that customer training and the professional training side, the 130 courses that I mentioned, our academic partners get access to all of those courses. So that is, when they're about 2 hours each. So that's, gosh, almost 300 hours of content that you get access to. And it's project files, slide decks, and then the video tutorials. So our partners get everything from like game essentials, general studies, media and entertainment, programming essentials, and then gold partners get access to deep dive. But you know, when I think about this is a lot of like Unreal Engine stuff. But you know, when I was working at a university, I always knew, and this is what I would say, is like, I teach skills. I don't teach software. And an engine isn't software. That's an important distinction. But we have to focus on what those skills are, because the technology will change, or you have to learn how to learn lots of technology. So what I want to show today is a research project we did. And this was designed to say, like, you know, when we're thinking about the job gaps that exist, and there are real gaps. So we decided to go and look at a few countries and measure it. And we saw, for instance, in France, when we took all of the students who were studying real time in that country, and we looked at the jobs that were coming out, there was about a 2,000 person gap happening every year. And that was going on year over year, that there was this 2,000 person gap. So what were those gaps? How do we quantify them? And it's hard work. There's no silver bullet for this. There's just a lot of digging. So a lot of the time we avoid it. We go to anecdotal discussions. And some of the anecdotal discussions will be like, oh, we need this skill because it's critical. But when you ask the industry, like, how many of those skills do you need? Like, sometimes, let's use tech artists. It's a very valuable skill. But it might be like, oh, we need like 2 a year. That's very different from another skill that might be like, I don't know, 200. But a TD or a tech artist might be a critical skill. So we did this research, and we found, like, by country, we could look at how many art roles there were, how many programming roles, and even production roles. Like, so we did this work to quantify that. And then we also noticed those gaps and what was coming up in the job descriptions, which I'm going to share with you. And then we looked our own way of testing. So we say, hey, for our authorized instructors, we have game development as a test, we have look development, we have these different assessments. How do we look at what is actually happening in the editor and identify those gaps and what those core competencies would be? And then we ran our own pilot projects. So we said, well, how do we know that, that's great that we've appraised the problem and we know what our assessment is, but how do we know that by doing this thing, it will produce that skill and success? So we ran a series of projects. Has anyone heard of the fellowship before? Okay, so the fellowship was a 3-week immersive program where we'd take industry artists, and they would learn Unreal Engine as they were making the thing. So usually there was a project. So it was either a short film, sometimes it was, we're working on a game right now, which is gonna be crazy. And what we noticed is that in 3 weeks, it was full-time, so it was condensed, we could take that curriculum and make it what is a semester or 2 semesters worth of material. And when we measured the people going through the 3-week program, now they were professionals, so they already had the fundamentals of 3D. When we measured 6 months afterwards and asked them if it had a career change, 87% of them said that it impacted their career. So we know that this is something that we've tried and it's a formula that works. So first I'm gonna look at games, and you guys have incredible experience. The meetings that I've had this week, I've been so impressed with the knowledge. So I'm doing a deeper dive here. I'm gonna try to pull out the things that I think might be, that could require more attention, but there's so much that's being done well. I would just want to acknowledge that before I get into some things that I think that will create that wider link between industry and education. So the key part for game development when we're looking at it is we're like, yeah, we really want that player engagement, and it has to be about the interactivity. That's sort of the core molecule for games. And so when we test it, and so what I'm showing you here is basically a visual way of how we use our own exam when we're doing the authorized instructors. So if you ever apply to be an authorized instructor, you'll find the study guide. Don't worry, I'm not like cheating by giving this information. We just thought, hey, let's make it visual. Like, where are you spending time in the editor, and what would that mean for your students as well? So you can see testing and optimization and blueprint visual scripting, the interactive framework, these sort of higher parts, because that's where we think that more of the time should be spent as core competencies. And maybe you guys say this to your students a lot of the time. Who here is in the game side for their students? Is that making a game is only part of the process. Publishing a game is really, a necessary aspect. And when we think about this life cycle, we spend a lot of time valuing prototyping for making games, and then it's like, oh, you're so tired. Publishing a game becomes an afterthought. And so this is part of the reason why Unreal Editor for Fortnite and UE has such strengths. So when we kind of think it as two different ways to build. First, if you have students who are players and they are learning to be creators and game makers, then Unreal Editor for Fortnite is a much easier way for them to take the intuition of playing on console or PC and making a game out of that. So you get this nice streamline. But it's experimental. It's really neat. It's still a new tool. And then as sophistication carries on, this is where Unreal Engine would come in for larger scale worlds, for things that are going to have a different visual fidelity. Now, the crazy thing is, I'm going to show you an example of a project. This was a group of artists, actually just a couple of game makers, working with an Egyptologist. Wait, that's not it. Egyptologist, thank you. And they made this game that is both educational and help them understand the process of making and publishing a game. So what I love about this is that it actually had a lot of historical accuracy. This was a very quick view of it. You can go in and have the experience. But it was an easy way for them to start making something because there were assets that was already prefabricated that they could bring in, and then they could customize a couple of different things. But as a student, you would have access to an insights dashboard. So you can publish your game and you can start to see player engagement. How many daily active users did I have? Monthly active users. You can start to A/B test certain mechanics. And so you're learning along the way. We are seeing that certain creators are publishing 10 games a month. Right? Like, just take that in, 10 games a month. What is your learning experience like when you start to publish 10 games a month? Right? It is a totally different thing. And that idea of like how close you feel to your audience, rather than the attachment we can have for our own idea, it's in the wild. I think that is exceptional. And so this is basically how to publish your island. There's a portal, and I'm going to give you a link and resources in a second, that has a whole bunch of UEFN learning content and on the way to publish your island. I'm going to say this, publishing the islands, if you're an educator and you can help your students with it, I think it's worthwhile, partially because they're launching a business when they do this. So to get paid for your island, you essentially have forms to fill out. And I understand that a lot of students are still learning to pack the dishwasher. So I want to be realistic about the expectations here. I know that it's not an easy thing just to say, publish your island. But once you get it, you could do 10 islands a month, and that is pretty impressive. Okay, here are your links and resources. So we ran a lot of these workshops at Unreal Fest in Seattle. So we battle tested them, and then we recorded them. And so I think that there's like at least 12 hours of content when it comes to tutorials. And then you'll have the walkthrough on how to publish your island and more. And we see that this is, I just said that this is for games, but we actually have two great examples. One, a lot of animation students are using this just to make or create sort of a rough trailer. Right? Like they just kind of want to see how things happen really quickly. And then we decided, we were like, well, we're going to take a whole bunch of students who are non-games, right? We know that there's a lot of programs where people are studying sort of 3D or interactive design and a more generalist skill set. what can they do with Unreal Editor for Fortnite? So we had 18 campuses in France, 350 students. We gave them this learning material. Then they were in teams of 5 and actually had 5 days to create a game. And we saw incredible results. It was amazing. So in 5 days, everyone had a prototype. They could go deeper if they wanted to. We actually, at the showcase, we selected 10 of the projects that came and invited industry. So Disney was there, L'Oreal was there, and it was an exceptional moment of showing, hey, this is what's in the hands of young creators and what's possible in 5 days. And so what about game art? So we just talked a little bit about game development and how publishing a game is essential as part of that process. And what do we see with game art? So I think there's so many different templates out there that are exciting, but can be a bit visually distracting. So we decided, okay, one of the powerful things for a student is to understand their creative voice and how aesthetics can vary in what they choose to express, what the themes are. But we took 5 core templates. So we said, hey, there's a wide variety of vehicle games out there. There's a wide variety of fixed camera, first person. We want to bring a class together, take these 5 templates, and let's say a group of students are going to be working on the vehicle template, a group will be working on isometric, and we want to see how the breadth of aesthetic expression can happen. So what we're starting off, and we'll be able to share these templates with you, is say, we're going to make like a naked world. We're going to make it so that all you have is the most basic game mechanics there. It's already playable. Right now, the game artists can come in and they can just dress it up. And actually, they get to spend the most of their time on the creative parts. And what we were able to see is that in 3 weeks, we had entirely different vehicle games come out of this. So with like the core basics, we were able to see, hey, anybody can start to use our libraries, our textures, things that are coming from Quixel. And then this is our, pardon the Fortnite colors here, guys. This is the curriculum. So if you have 10 weeks of curriculum, you can focus on the first 5, first 10, and then the last 5 would be like extracurricular if they're doing a game, finishing their final project. If you have a year-long course, then this would totally work out because you would have some extra time for project and for them to finish their reel and polish it up and get ready when they're applying for jobs. So, sequence is one of the most important things when we're teaching something. And so this is where, where do you actually start and what do we think is the most important things to focus on? This is what we have. So it goes from really understanding the game structure, right? So what is the language that we use? We're coming out with different glossaries so you can compare other engines and understand how to move from one to the other, as well as like, how do I navigate this engine? And then we go into blueprint immediately. Like I said, I showed you, that's one of the core skills. And this is something that once artists get into the mode, there is so much flexibility that they can create in the aesthetics. And then, of course, materials and lighting. And then we move into more difficult material. So this is where if you have your 10-week curriculum, you can stick on this side. And then if you want to get into the deep dive stuff, this is where creating landscapes with PCG, those larger worlds come in. Now, in that job analysis that we did, we noticed that in 40% of the artist jobs in North America had tech art listed as a skill. This is fascinating to me because it basically shows that tech art is no longer just a job in itself, but it really is a skill that we need to start to massage into every role. So how do you do that? I know curriculum can take 4 years to change. That's what I hear, right? Who here has had to change curriculum and it takes 4 years? Yes. So how are we going to start to incorporate tech art without having to go to the government and basically say like, hey, let's reinvent this wheel? So when we think about tech art, we know that it is difficult to teach as a program because you really have to know the whole pipeline. And many times it's like, well, is it tech art for animation? Is it tech art for this? How are we defining tech art? About 10 years ago, maybe 8 years ago, tech art really started to come on the scene at GDC, and it was like everyone just discovered it for the first time. And I remember asking, like, what is it about tech art now? And it really was something that wasn't glamorous before. It like kind of fell between the cracks because people would think, I'm not good enough to be a programmer, or I'm not good enough to be an artist, so I'm going to make these tools and I'm going to focus on optimization. And then it's like the world came to light and it was like, wow, this is an extremely helpful skill. And we not only expect it just as a job role, we need everybody to be able to contribute. So this is where you're spending time, right? So when you're thinking about where in the editor and where in Unreal Engine you're spending time, a lot of it will be on scripting because there's tools that you're making, and then optimization is an important part. But that actually goes through all the different parts. You almost have to be a generalist as a tech artist. That's part of what makes it hard to teach as a full program. So the question is, well, what is one thing that I could do to improve the tech artist skills in my students? And so here's an idea that we came up with, and this is from speaking with industry. So we said, okay, like, what about if we take a scene, right, that is not optimized, that is riddled with, some very interesting constraints that we put in, maybe a couple broken things, and we get students to troubleshoot. Troubleshooting is an essential skill and something that I'm starting to see is almost eroding a little bit. I don't know if it was COVID or it's just that the amount of content that we have at our fingertips, but it's something that we have to continue to give focus. So here we would say, okay, let's try to bring them into awareness of the triangle count. Let's think about those large textures. What levels of details can we adjust? Is there anything else we can do so that if the camera is rolling by, then you have the LODs that are adjusting live? And then you give that scene, and you can actually have this as a group project. You could see if they can analyze it together. But that skill, that appraisal, troubleshooting, and then building that optimization, this is one exercise where you start to think like a tech artist without having to spend your entire career on it. Now, every game, film, car, fashion ad needs a world. And so in a lot of the programs where we have students who are not necessarily specializing just in film or just in games, this is a skill that can serve them for a lot of career mobility. And so if you think about the one piece, hey, I can build a world in Unreal Engine, that means that I can go into X number of industries. In fact, this is kind of crazy. There was someone told me that outside of games, 80% of the workflows work across architecture, fashion, film, and automotive. So this is a life skill. How many other pieces of technology do you think that has that broad expansion? So when we're thinking about a world, it really has a lot to do with that landscape element, bringing in different assets and all the props that are there. And so in the editor, it looks like this. So we have data management, right? So you're bringing in all these different assets. You're going to have to think about the optimization, but also the placement of them. Then we have materials and lighting. And so the curriculum that we've designed here, again, thinking that what could this be like in a 10-week or 15-week curriculum is this. So we start with just an intro to world building, again, like giving that orientation. And then we go into, basically photogrammetry. So what are the photogrammetry assets that you might be bringing in? Data smith and ingestion, right? So now you're assembling. And then we go into materials, landscape, water tools. And so you actually see that these are 12 courses, and then these ones I would say are slightly more advanced. But this would be the sequence that we have picked, tried, and tested. And what we were able to see is actually people who'd never worked in Unreal Engine, after they did this, and this was about 3 weeks of full-time work, they made incredible worlds. And we actually had them roll D&D dice. So we made this matrix, and we were like, okay, you have to make a monochromatic world, or use this palette, or your world is in the desert, or it has this. And then they actually found themselves on the map, and they had to invent a world that was through the D&D dice, and it was an amazing exercise. So when we're speaking with industry and we ask them, well, what is the assignment you would give to students, or how would you test this for people applying to your studio? This is what they said. So first, you can put a camera on a ground plane, and then you start to examine that connection. You say, okay, I have this camera sitting right here, and I'm going to build a world right where the camera is, almost like taking like a diorama approach. And so you don't have to worry about scale in this way. All of a sudden, it's not a 2-kilometer world. You're really taking like that Wes Anderson approach and just placing everything there, and it's going to be its own little world. And then the other side is you can say, okay, go for vastness. If you want a big world, go for that big world. But what you want to do is take on the mindset of a filmmaker and you want to go and look at that world and think about it from a location scouting perspective. Where can I put this camera and how would that actually work? And like, is there a tree that's getting in the way? And if I was speaking with an art director, might they consider? So these are the two assignments that would bring world building into an industry core competency. For film and TV, I don't have animation with that grid that I'm going to show you for film and TV, but it is coming. And what we're thinking about this, we sometimes call it look development, is that it is what is making that world beautiful, right? So it is all that rich materials and textures and the lighting that comes through. And so here you see that reflected just like that. So there would be some scripting, right? Because you still want to be able to layer materials and make them unique. And then you're going to spend a lot of time on materials, lighting, and rendering. And so we see a lot of full programs and projects being rendered in Unreal Engine now on the film side. And so what would this look like from an assignment perspective? This one I'm going to challenge you with. It is actually easy to make a lot of things look beautiful in Unreal Engine, right? That is one of the things that we find is not so difficult. But what about a digital twin? And so this is actually on the film side where things get more complicated. So you might say, hey, you have this real building, or we have to match it in the exact specs. So we know that we have to have the right reference, the right kind of lighting setup, accurate measurements to this. So how do you take the world that you're creating and how do you blend it with this object that's there? And when it comes to production design, this is the thing all the time. So right now for virtual production, what we see is you might actually have an object that is going to be on the stage, and then you also need the digital version of it behind that. So if we can start to blend those two and get students to think, it's not just about always making beautiful things faster, but it's about the reference that they have and being true to that. This is a teamwork one. So we know all of this is a team sport, right? You don't get away working in film or games without it being a team sport. And so here we said, well, why don't we have someone hand off the scene? So you're going to look at something, again, that might be a broken scene. And so we're getting that troubleshooting as part of that skill. So here we have a broken scene. How are you going to work together to fix this? I mean, this happens all the time. The scene that you get handed is not necessarily organized or labeled, and so you have to figure out the communication strategy that is going to make that project work. And so moving to animation, this is the curriculum that we came up with. So we had an incredible experience. We did a fellowship for animation, and we had about 200 people go through that program. And then we made it public for about 30 days. So we had 3 weeks of classes, kind of launching every week. And we had 36,000 people stay with us online from day one until the end of the program. So there was a huge appetite. And what we saw is that this curriculum works. So if you're going to start and you want to include keyframing and some mocap, there's a nice blend that you can find. So we start with that transition. Like, what is that difference between a DCC and an engine? I know that that is something you may be used to, but what we find is that it's really easy to think, oh, a DCC, I can plug it in and plug it out where I want to. But an engine changes the entire context for how the problems get solved. And so here we have that transitioning side, and then we get into sequencer because the camera is such an important part when it comes to film and animation. And then we get into FBX ingestion and control rig, and then back to sequencer, right? So every time you're going to know exactly how you're moving the character and the camera. And then the second part here is related to mocap workflows, including IK retargeting, which is typically for games, but we're seeing how it can have this huge benefit for animation. It is hard to put words to how we move and articulate that experience. We put these animators in mocap suits, and all of a sudden, without having to be verbal about it, they start to move their body in entirely new ways, and they can see how they are moving and how they want the character to move. It becomes this embodied experience between the two. So it's a really dynamic way to teach animation. Oh gosh, I don't know what happened there. I'm going to go back. We're going to hold with bated breath. Here we go. Maximum suspension. Perfect. I can go from here. Let's see. Whoop, whoop. I think slide. You can do the whole presentation. One more time. Yeah, slide 36. Okay, I can speed from here. All right. And here we go. Animation. So what we did for animation was an exquisite corpse project. So we said, okay, what you're going to do is you're still going to have team building. You're making 7 to 10 seconds of animation, no joke. And again, we did this in 3 weeks. So we have 7 to 10 seconds of animation. They make it just until the next student has to pick it up. So then you have this kind of like line that goes, and there's usually something that happens. So you throw a ball, then the next character picks up the ball, or you had a character that woke up every morning. So they experienced their day, went to sleep, experienced their day, went to sleep. I like the like more dynamic one of the ball being thrown. And so here are the key takeaways. There are too many. We just cycled through a ton of different examples, and that is why we're building Unreal Academy. What you're going to find in there are deeper dives into all of those assignments, but really the learning paths that you can take to your students will be super helpful in the classroom. And I don't know if it's my clicker. There we go. I'm going to talk about our academic partner program. So we love watching our community members excel. Like, I am a huge fan. The schools that I've met with the last couple of days, I'm holding them close to my heart because it's one of my favorite things is to see how passionate everyone is about helping students and also translating how complex the industry is to the classroom. So this was a few months ago. I'm going to show you the past date. We had a program where basically we had not a lot of levels. It was more like you're authorized as a school or instructor, and then we had training centers that might be silver or gold, or at that point it was just premier. And we decided we're going to build this out a little bit more. So we're going to have bronze, silver, gold for each one of these categories so that people can come in and we're inclusive for the efforts being made, and then you can grow along with us. So I'm going to talk about these programs and those benefits. So we're going to look at academic partners first. And this list is longer than I can actually have on this slide, but I wanted to highlight the two here. One is the complimentary access to our professional training catalog. So that's where you get access to all those courses that we make for our customers. And then you're also listed on our partner directory. And that is for visibility as well as over time, we want better matchmaking services between studios who might be looking for talent, being able to connect to those local schools. And here, we're going to keep adding to Unreal Academy and the training resources. So this is something where online right now we have 60 courses. We have 130 total. You'll still get access to those project files. But every year there's going to be something new that comes out. And because Unreal Engine is always changing, just think about how this changes your rate of being able to make curriculum or costs related to curriculum. So if you're an academic partner, you get the newest version of 5.4. You get the project files for all these different ones. So it saves you a lot of that cost for creating it yourself. And you have our deep dive materials. So if you don't have as much time to spend on Substrate or PCG, you've got the material there for self-learning or some of the things that you can work on that. One student who seems to have binged it over the weekend, and that's all that they're focused on. So we have these categories, bronze, silver, gold. What I recognize is it takes a long time to get a teacher or to get your own knowledge up for Unreal Engine, and it takes a long time to get it into the curriculum. So we have bronze, which is to say, if you are teaching Unreal Engine today, come join us as a partner. Right? After that 1 year, and if you already have student work, that's great. We basically say the most important thing for us to see is how you're teaching it for your students and what the results are for the student work. That allows us to actually show it to studios if we have permission on our student reel, as well as coach you or find different ways when you can be a speaker at different events. So how do you actually become an academic partner? We have this. So we have phase 1 is really the easiest thing. I know you guys have to play, parent, psychologist, paperwork person for your schools. You have a whole bunch of things that you have to do. I don't want to make this an administrative nightmare. So the only thing you have to do here is submit a form. After you submit that form and we see that it's in your curriculum and that you have a teacher who's teaching Unreal Engine, then it goes through a review process, 2 different reviewers, and then we actually move it and say, hey, that's great. Okay, you're successful. So you can get your badge, and we ask you to complete your ArtStation profile. That's where our directory is going to be. And then for, let's say, if you've already had student work or if it's a little while after, I'm having this, I think the battery might be dying here. Then we say, okay, now you're eligible to be a silver partner. So for a silver partner, you're going to just have to submit student work. We show you kind of when that is if you want to be part of the student reel, but we give you an entire year to submit that. What we want to do in the upcoming years is actually have like a recruitment cycle. Thank you. A recruitment cycle where we invite studios to be judges about what makes it to the student reel, but they'd be able to get familiar with your school and student work and give great feedback. And that's so special for the students. So when we see the student reel and they can tag themselves in it, they immediately feel like they are part of this industry and that they're making a difference. So what you will see is, there we go, is that's the first year as you submit the student work, and then to be a gold partner, it's something that you're eligible for, so it's not really a checklist. One of the things that I say is to become an authorized instructor, but there's other ways. So we've seen huge community events. So one of our partners hosted a summit, a career summit, and other ones have hosted diversity summits. And industry days is something that's interesting. So this is more where we get to have a really deep relationship with your school. You get to celebrate the things that you're doing, and we get to spend time. Awesome. Thanks. For the student showcase, yes. So with that, this is actually coming out. We're collecting work this month, and then it will be coming out in October when we know a lot of hiring is happening, and we can also show it at Unreal Fest in Seattle, which is where 850 companies come. So if you're interested in this, let me know. I'm going to give you the QR code to apply in a minute. Where we're listing schools is on ArtStation. So this is partially because so much hiring happens there. I know that it's more for art than dev, but we're thinking about that. We have it in mind, and we've got solutions coming. But with ArtStation, that's where hundreds of jobs are being posted. Having students go there to see the jobs and recruiters is a tighter cycle for everybody. And students actually get an ArtStation Pro account. So if you're an academic partner, they get that account for free. Again, they're building in their profile. They're starting to take that entrepreneurial mindset, not just about publishing a game, showing your work, being able to see where it lives with other people and how it compares. And then this is the QR code. Right now, I would love to see more people in Australia become an authorized instructor as well as an academic partner. So to become an authorized instructor, it's a somewhat similar process, but it's slightly different. You would take an exam. So the exams that we have for authorized instructors is what I showed with a lot of those photos today. So we have game development, tech art, world building, look development, and we will be adding animation and motion graphics soon, probably more to come. And so you would, for the academic or for the authorized instructors, you would do your exam and submit a demo, and then you would go through that process. Now, the one thing that we ask for authorized instructors is that on an annual basis, you make one piece of content for the community. And so that's also, I already mentioned that we have that like how to make great content out there. And one piece of content will be able to hit some of the gaps, because there's a lot of stuff for us to cover, but also what we think will be most helpful for students. And with that, I'm going to say thank you and see if anyone has any questions. So thank you very much. Any questions?
Thanks for the talk, Julie. Just a note, that QR code to apply wasn't working.
Okay. Thank you. We will circulate this deck after for anyone that's attended, and then we can update that. Thanks. Yes.
Hi, I saw a lot on Blueprint Visual Scripting. Is there much support for the C++ side of things?
There is support for the C++ side. We actually are delivering workshops the first week of June on C++. Now that time zone is what makes it a little bit difficult, but I'll tell you, we are probably going to move it globally. So we're going to have a couple of those coming out at different times. That is, I'm so glad you called it out. Probably one of the biggest, I don't want to say blind spots, but opportunities that we have is really related to C++. When we did that job analysis, what we noticed is that if you look at, let's say, Unreal Engine jobs and then proprietary engines, which is where C++ would come in, and Unity jobs, if you take the C++ and Unreal Engine, it represents something like 2/3 of the jobs that are out there. So it's really like a bulk of opportunity. I think the part that we have to work on together is that a lot of junior jobs might be for modeling, might be for something else. And so this is a skill that we're actually trying to have more companies list Unreal Engine. There was fear of doing that a few years ago because they were so worried about finding Unreal Engine artists that they actually coached their HR folks not to put Unreal in all the jobs because they were like, we just don't know if we'll be able to find someone. And now that that has been changing and they want to make sure that all those junior jobs exist, you're going to be seeing some of that change probably coming up. Any other questions?
Do you have anything specifically for kids who are homeschooled or maybe distance age kids who have a lot of spare time? I think my daughter here.
Yeah.
Beyond the basic academy, can they get access to some of the school-based stuff as well?
Yeah, the Epic developer community has a ton of content. There is a For Educators button on there, so you can find some of the ones that we'd say are probably great for high schools. And you can see, like, we have Fortnite creative and sustainable development goals. We have, your first hour animating, again, for, let's say, 16 to 20-year-olds in there, with a lot of the careers. So anything called Unreal Futures would be great content to start with. And we have Unreal Futures is sort of looking at a small project. It could be for fashion, animation, advertising that you could do with whatever machine you might have at home and get up and running. Any other questions? That's a great question. Is there a fellowship coming up for educators? We always allow a certain amount of seats for our fellowship for educators. So there are 2 coming up. One is starting in July, and that will be on the US time zone. And then there is one for the EU time zone in August. But we're looking to add another one that will be in sort of APAC and ANZ as a time zone. That material we're also going to run publicly. So the good news is that if you can't join us live at any of those time zones, we will make a public version in November that will show you all the courses that we're running, and we will have live Q&As that go along with it. Let's see if we can circulate information about that afterwards, but that's a great question. Any others? Yes? Mm-hmm.
Is there any possibility that you want to speak to that, looking that up and sending it to the professionals? As we've spoken about, anyone who's done that at the moment, there's a massive gap.
Yeah, there is. So look development would be a start to looking at some of it, and it doesn't cover everything like stage operations. I think we look at virtual production in a couple different ways. The ICVFX, or the stage component, as slightly separately from the content component to it. And so we actually now, the sort of term that's come across is visualization. So visualization, there's a guide that you can find online too. And that visualization guide would cover a lot of, a little bit on the stage side, but it's really the how-to for everybody. We're not testing it at this point in time, but it's a good thought. So maybe we should add that as one of our exams. Thank you. Okay, I'll take, yes. Yes. Yeah, so the question is around monetization and islands, and this is a good one. Actually, I would love to have this as a conversation with anyone out of the room afterwards, but my understanding is it depends on the university, but there is IP ownership or management while a student is a student. And then when they leave, they actually become the IP owners. But this is different from place to place. So if a student right now publishes an island, that would probably be a discussion between the institution and the individual, how they're looking at that. We're trying to come up with a model for incubators. So if anyone is interested in having an incubator, we're trying to find like, hey, is there a way where, as an example, we would take out the cost for publishing to EGS. We would look at how to make that island more permanent, as that's something that we can offer. And then actually, the licensing component is probably something that has to be an individual agreement. Yeah, but right now we see, you can get students to make their island and either publish it as soon as they graduate, or a school would say, yeah, we can publish it, but you're still an individual who is able to receive the funds. One last question? Yes. Oh, actually, you in the back. Yeah, for Unity to Unreal. I hear this from a few different places. So either they'll say, hey, I want to move because the cost, right, that comes up. Others are moving because of the jobs that they can get for their students. As a company, we're actually working on a lot more examples of Unity to UE to help people transition. And then I would say the most incentive is being able to publish to our social graph with UEFN. And immediately, you don't have to think about a lot of the things about launching on a platform. Like, you already have it there. You don't have to think as much about the advertising as you might in other cases. And that we see that the major change, like from a government perspective, is that there are some countries that invested a lot in mobile, and data privacy has changed the viability of those businesses. And so now there needs to be another alternative from leaning so heavily on mobile and thinking about games more widely. And as some players are looking at the convergence between film and games, it's like, oh, well, there's actually a cool opportunity, because we see that the graphics now is in greater combination, but if I make something that's a game, I can also put it, let's say it can be standalone as a game there, but I can make a trailer or something as a small experience on UEFN. I can test it out on UEFN. I can make that game. And then if I still want to use those assets for something that is a story that I want to tell, like a cinematic or something else, then I have that ability to do so. And so as the industry is changing, it gives more mobility and flexibility for people to engineer their own career. All right. I think we're at time, but I want to say thank you so much one more time. Stay in touch, and I'll be in the hall if you have any questions. Thanks.